Hi, year six, how's it going? I hope you had a good week last week. I hope you enjoyed all the silly sat stuff. We really enjoyed getting lots of your photos in of that, and sounds like you did enjoy it, so that's good. Um, what I thought we could do this week is I'm going to plan the first 3 days English, and then Miss Withers is going to do Thursday and Friday. And what I thought we could do for these 3 days is this is something I've done with year six a few times. It's quite good fun. We're going to rewrite the story of Little Red Riding Hood, which obviously is a story aimed at younger children. But we're going to give it a bit of a twist, and we're going to play a little twist that the baddie in the story is actually Little Red Riding Hood, and actually the wolf was quite innocent in it, and it's and just giving it that take on it, so it's evil Red Riding Hood. Um, what we'll do is I've got a planned out in this document here. So it says Little Red Riding Hood from the wolf's perspective. What if Little Red Riding Hood was the baddie all along? We're going to spend 3 days rewriting the story, but we are going to write it with a twist, writing it from the perspective of the wolf. I've put a basic outline for the 3 days. However, I've put feel free to work at different speeds, um, because you might do more in one day than another day, or you might stick to the three lessons as they are. If you do finish early, what could be quite nice on the Wednesday is maybe to rewrite the story, write it all out, and do it as like a fold out book or something, or even like a pop-up book or something, put pictures in it, sort of publish it and make it look really, really good. It depends how quickly you work on Monday and Tuesday, really. For Monday today, what we'll do is remind ourselves of the story of Little Red Riding Hood. I'm sure most of you know it already from when you were younger. Um, I've written an example from the perspective of grandma. So again, trying to write from a different perspective, I've done an example like that. We'll have a look at that. Um, and then I've done a plan for a version from the perspective of the wolf that we'll have a look at, um, considering the fact that Red was the baddie all along and the wolf was innocent. Um, you can use my plan, or if you want, you can write out your own plan. It depends how different you want to go with the story. And then I'd suggest today maybe just looking at writing the opening paragraph. Um, what I would say is then on Tuesday and Wednesday, I've sort of when look at the plan, I've broken it into 5 parts. You could write 2 more parts on Tuesday and 2 more parts on Wednesday. Like I said earlier, if you want to finish that earlier and do it all Monday, Tuesday, you could do it. You could write a published book on the Wednesday, maybe. All right. Um, go to the next slide. So we're going to retell the story from the perspective of the wolf, and you got a quote there: "She's the villain, not me." Um, so what we're doing is we're retelling a narrative from a different perspective. So first of all, what are the key features of a narrative? Um, might be time just to pause the video and think to yourself, what would be the key success for writing a story, a narrative? All right, pause the video now and just have a think. Okay, some of the key features that I would say you need is you'll have dialogue within it and punctuated correctly with inverted commas. It always have a beginning, middle, and end, and we'll plan that out later. Um, might have a change in time. So what we're going to do in this one is present tense to start with, and then a flashback to the past. Um, use of a range of punctuation. Okay. There's lots of different types of punctuation there. Commas used correctly, exclamation marks, question marks, dashes, semicolons, colons, and hyphens. So you might look to include all those. Lots of sentence openers, fronted adverbials. Quickly, suddenly, at that moment. Um, description, expanded noun phrases. A young innocent girl with a ruby red cloak. Prepositional phrases, beside the forest, inside the cottage, where things are, and just different types of sentences. So shorter sentences, longer sentences, maybe using conjunctions or relative clauses. Okay, so that's some of the features we'll be looking to include in our story. Right, what I've done is, if I go to it, I've got a version, a very basic version of Little Red Riding Hood. I'm not going to read that through. It's something I found um, off the internet, and it just gives you the story of Little Red Riding Hood. to remind you if you can't remember it. I'm not going to read through that. If you want to go onto YouTube and have a look, there's lots of, you type in Little Red Riding Hood, there's loads of little videos aimed at younger children you can watch just to remind yourself of the story. If you want to read through that, feel free. What I've done is I've written a version from the perspective of the grandmother. So it's just looking back at the story, but looking from a different perspective. Think back to some of those features I said just. Can you spot them in this story here? Okay. This also breaks into this 5 parts I'm going to talk about later. So we've got, sitting here in my armchair, I think back to that fateful day, the day my granddaughter was so nearly tricked by the big bad wolf. So that's the present tense, and now it's going to flip back in time. Once upon a time, there lived a small girl called Little Red Riding Hood. She was my beloved granddaughter. She lived happily with her parents beside a dark, gloomy forest. I, myself, lived in a small cottage on the other side of the forest. However, deep in the forest, there lived a truly terrifying creature, the big bad wolf. Grandmother's poorly, said Little Red Riding Hood's mother one day. Please take this cake, but be sure not to stop along the way. That morning, my granddaughter set off through the deep, dark forests. The trees that towered overhead sheltered her from the rain that poured down from up above. Suddenly she heard a noise. She looked around, but there was nothing to be seen. Then, all of a sudden, in the distance, yes, it was the big bad wolf. Good day, my dear, growled the wolf, with an evil smirk smeared across his ghastly face. What are you doing here? I'm going to my grandmother's cottage. I'm going to give her this cake, replied Little Red Riding Hood. Suddenly the wolf devised a cunning plan. He was going to trick my granddaughter. Wouldn't your grandmother like some of these flowers? He smiled. What a good idea, said Little Red Riding Hood as she stopped to pick up a bunch. At that very moment, the wolf sped ahead through the forest towards my cottage. After just a few minutes, he arrived and knocked at my door. Hello, grandmother, he growled. It's Little Red Riding Hood. I knew straight away it wasn't my granddaughter. Her voice was far sweeter than the gruff tone of this impostor, this monster. Thinking quickly, I crept underneath my bed. All of a sudden, the wolf entered the house. He looked around, but I didn't make a sound. All that could be heard was the sound of his stomach rumbling. No one's here, he grumbled. Never mind, Little Red Riding Hood will be along soon. Quickly, the wolf put on my dressing gown and nightcap, the cheek of him. Then he hopped into my bed and pretended to nap. My heart was thumping 10 to the dozen. I was petrified. Hours passed by, and then, all of a sudden, there was a knock at the door. It was my Little Red Riding Hood. Hello, grandmother, my granddaughter called. It's Little Red Riding Hood. Come in, my dear, growled the wolf, grinning from cheek to cheek. My granddaughter opened the door and tiptoed into the room. Oh, grandmother, she gasped, what big ears you have. All the better to hear you with, my dear, growled the wolf. And grandmother, what big eyes you have, said my granddaughter, moving closer towards the bed. All the better to see you with, my dear, growled the wolf. And grandmother, what big teeth you have, she stuttered. All the better to eat you with, roared the wolf as he jumped from his bed. As the wolf leapt from my bed, the nightcap dropped right off his head, his horrifying face revealing itself to my terrified little girl. Her face was a picture of disbelief, of shock, of terror, of panic. Quick, down here, dear, I whispered as I pulled my granddaughter down beneath my bed. Just then a woodcutter passed by the cottage. He heard the growling and howling and dashed inside. With one large swish of his axe, he slaughtered the big bad wolf. It all occurred right in front of our eyes. The woodcutter had saved our lives. We all stared at each other in shock and disbelief until my granddaughter, with a beaming smile spread across her face, said, Mother was right, you know. I'll never stop on my way through the forest ever again. And then it flashes back to the present tense again now. So it says, so now I sit here reminiscing about that dreadful day. The day the woodcutter became the hero and saved us all from that awful big bad wolf. So that's basically the story, so it reminds you of the story, and also it's just done from the grandmother's perspective, which is slightly different. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to write from the perspective of the wolf, and in our version, the wolf is going to be the victim, and Little Red Riding Hood the villain. So an example plot twist here could be Little Red Riding Hood picks on the wolf in the forest. The wolf races to Grandma's cottage to play a trick back on her. Maybe grandmother's in on the trick. and maybe it was the wolf in this. He's going to be quite a nice guy. He didn't mean anything by it. Little Red Rhino is quite an evil little brat, and actually she's the one that caused all this in the first place. Okay, so it's a slightly different twist on the fairy tale. Um, to do this, you need to think about a plan. So, usual sort of plan would go in 5 parts. You have the story opening, building up once upon a time, so in the setting and the characters, and then you get to this problem area where the wolf meets evil Red Riding Hood, and perhaps evil Red Riding Hood plays a trick on the wolf. So the wolf decides to play a trick back at the cottage, and then finishing it off with them sitting here now, looking back at this story and how everything's gone wrong, and now the wolf is seen as the baddie when really he isn't. Um, what I've done is I've created an example plan which you can use. If you'd rather go away from my plan, that's something you could do now. If you want to use my plan, feel free. If you want to write your own plan, you can set one out like this. It's one I've set out. So it's broken into 5 parts, and it says, first of all, a flashback, thinking back to that fateful day. So the wolf, maybe just in his forest, thinking back. So he's an old wolf now. Part 1B, so it's again the start, is the setting. Set the scene with the wolf minding his own business in the woods. Part 2, okay, so we've got 2 parts here. So part 2A, the build-up. The wolf meets Red in the woods. I've changed it to Red because it's a bit long, shorter than saying Little Red Riding Hood every time. Part 2B, Red is nasty. Bill plays a trick on the wolf and includes some dialogue there. So this is the problem basically. So Red's quite a nasty character. And then you can go almost back to the original story in a way and say, okay, so the wolf travels to Grandma's house, and he explains to Grandma that he wants to play a trick on the granddaughter, and Grandma agrees to that because Grandma agrees that she's not a very nice character. Part 4, the trick. Red arrives at the house and the wolf tricks her, okay? And then the woodcutter arrives, or it could be someone else arrives. You escape the wolf, but unfortunately your reputation is ruined as Red plays the victim, and forever in all the fairy tales it's seen as you're the bad guy. But actually, in our version, we're saying we weren't the bad guy because we're the wolf, we're not the bad guy. Okay? That's a basic outline of what we're going to do. I'm going to now, there's some sentence open. I've done a sheet of sentences, and they're your features that you want to include. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause. I'm going to start this video now, and then I think what I'll do is model writing maybe the opening and maybe part 1 and part 2 on separate videos that you can watch, and then you can watch that, and then you can have a go at doing your own, broken down into all 5 parts. Okay,